Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. Ukraine War News Update, first part for the 19th of October 2024. I do apologise for being late today. My son ran the 5k, he's only 14 so he can't do the longer 10k or whatnot, but he ran the 5k Great South Run, which was nice for charity this morning, and I've just got back, so sorry. Not sorry. Let's go straight to where we normally start. Not straight, because I'm just giving you some preamble. To the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below. 1,380 personnel lost is another really heavy day. And in fact, it is now a record-breaking 30-day rolling average, as Dell told me this morning. Thank you, Dell, for that, by the way. So here we have Dell's statistics that he dutifully does on a daily basis. Thank you. They are always linked in the video below, in the description, sorry, to the video below. So let's go to the data page and we'll have a look at the personnel. As you can see up there, a couple of really heavy days. Well, more than just a couple actually. We've had a month of very heavy casualty numbers, which has led us to this record-breaking statistic there, 1,301.33. Personnel lost. That's a 30-day rolling average. Wow, absolutely incredible. The 7-day average is pretty high as well, it has to be said. A couple of other particularly well, actually not really. Let's have a look at some of these other major categories: artillery, APVs and tanks. Let's look at those as far as rolling averages are concerned. Yeah, we're not at 7-day rolling averages high in those categories. So it's just personnel really is the main difficult one for the Russians. Although today 8 tanks lost is, I think, fairly high. Although it's on the nose for the daily average, I think the activity we've seen recently, that is contextually quite high because it's dipped down quite a few times. And we've had now, if we go back to the daily stats, in terms of tanks, we've had, and I think this is kind of what I mean. So if you look at the trend over the last few weeks, we've had these days where there've been 3, 4, 1, so on and so forth. And then we've had 8, 8, 8, 9, 9, 4, 13, 9, 17, 13, 8. So I think this week has been fairly challenging for the Russians in that category, and also 19 troop carrying AFVs, although that's on the daily average. The same sort of thing can be said, although I think there have been significantly higher days over the last few days in that category. 15 artillery systems is fairly low in terms of those losses. In fact, that is below the daily average, so it really is quite low. 38 vehicles and fuel tanks and 25 pieces of special equipment. That's interesting because 38 is actually somewhat lower than we're used to. 38 vehicles and fuel tanks. If we just bring this to the right a little bit. So vehicles and fuel tanks. So 55, 74, 84, 115, 71, 38, 32, 78, 83, 93, 38. So 38 is on the lower end of what we're used to in that category, but 25 vehicles and fuel tanks, pieces of special equipment is actually a significant number there. We've had that data set skewed by a random day when they said 99, but we think that was a mistake because there was, that same day there was 0 losses in the vehicles and fuel tanks. So if you took out the 99, actually 25 pieces of special equipment is really high in that category. I don't really know what that means though, because it's such a wide range of equipment that can be thrown into that category. It's a bit of a wide remit for that category that I don't really know what it tells us without knowing what types of kit was lost. But generally speaking, a fairly challenging day for the Russians, particularly with the personnel. Now, no Andrew Perpetua list yet today. War Translators Dmitry throws in an anecdote from the same unit that had these 2 chaps, Goodwin and Ernest. If you remember, these were quite highly thought of drone pilots who were sent in to meet assaults and were killed. And there's been quite a lot of pushback from the Russians about this because these were specialized people who were just drafted in to do infantry assaults because they are so desperate for people. Now, additional details have emerged about the Russian 87th Rifle Regiment, where the late drone pilots Goodwin and Ernest, who was sent on a doomed assault, had served. The report states that while the regiment continues to push southeast of Avdiivka, so I don't know whether that's that on that salient, just the southeast part of that salient, or whether we're coming further to the south. It probably is, you know, around Seladove, places like that. That's where I imagine this, if you remember where that is on the map. Seladove is this town that's been surrounded on that southeastern side of the salient there. But anyway, it's suffering devastating losses. In a desperate move, the commanders cancelled the evacuation of wounded soldiers to avoid further endangering rescue teams. Injured personnel are forced to traverse up to 10 kilometres of exposed terrain to reach safety on their own. Wounded soldiers are often rounded up and returned to the front line without treatment. The notorious commander, Puzik, remains in charge and continues to remove officers who refuse to lead their units into these deadly meat grinder assaults. The report reflects the true cost of any success of the Russian forces in this direction, yet Putin showed no sympathy or care for the soldiers during yesterday's meeting with journalists representing BRICS countries. The point is, and you know, you've got some proper video testimony and written testimony as to what's going on here. The losses are huge. Let's just go through the first 3 paragraphs here. So a few weeks ago, it was discovered that out of 600 military awards, only about 30 soldiers had actually received theirs. The rest had disappeared, and no further awards have been issued. The Russian Ministry of Defense has stepped in and is now distributing medals to all those who missed out. This delay occurred due to a ban imposed by General Krim, who commanded the South Group. He opposed awarding combat medals following the capture of Avdiivka. The contrary to what Alexander Kotz reported, it must be stressed that the 87th Rifle Regiment has always had assault units and took part in the assault on Avdiivka's industrial zone alongside Piatnashka units and mixed Ministry of Defense forces. They suffered their heaviest losses during these operations, starting in the autumn of 2023. So if you remember, October 2023 was when Avdiivka, the north of Avdiivka, was taken. You had those industrial units, the areas, the Terracon, and the coke mining area, coke plant. Currently, the regiment continues to fight in the areas west and southwest of Avdiivka. The regiment is facing a critical shortage of manpower. The number of wounded is overwhelming, and injured soldiers are being sent back to the front lines regardless of the severity of their wounds. And then evacuation of the wounded soldiers has been cancelled, etc., etc. Just really bad losses from these units operating there. Now, we talking of equipment losses now, and picking out some, I guess, not quite random bits of footage, but footage that I think is interesting or shows something slightly different. Now, yesterday I showed you a video, certainly referenced it, I think you saw the beginning of it, where a tank drove up to a BTR an armored personnel carrier drove up to 2 Ukrainian tanks thinking they were Russian tanks, and you had this connection to the command post that was looking at this through drones. It could obviously communicate to the tank, so by the way guys, you've got a BTR coming out to you and it's a Russian one, and it just drove up straight next to it, like 10 meters away, and then the tank just shot its round into the BTR from point blank range. It was a pretty incredible bit of footage. And for the second time in 3 days, a Russian APC packed with infantry takes a direct hit from a Ukrainian tank in the Kursk region. The spectacle is commented on by Ukrainian soldiers watching from the control room. Now, because I don't want to get into trouble for showing stuff blowing up, I just want to play you the beginning of this, just what they say. Oh, I can't.
Пидоры, сука! Как там, нормально, блядь? Давай, родной, блядь! Разъебашь их, сейчас пулемета, нахуй! Видно, просто дави их вот так, блядь, сука, ну, сука, ты шо, еб...
And I love it when they have this like genuine elation that you're seeing as they are having some success on the battlefield with their guys doing something to, obviously take out Russian equipment and whatnot. So that BTR or APC absolutely is hammered, as you can see there. It's burning, but it fundamentally disassembles, as I like to say, a really big hit, and that's why you hear them kind of whooping and hollering. Whoa! So good news there for the Ukrainians. I'm sure there's lots of video footage of Ukrainians under the cosh as well, because it's difficult for them at the moment, that's for sure. They're losing territory pretty much everywhere across the front line at the moment. Now, there's a HIMARS strike on a motorcycle unit, which is interesting because, A, you're seeing these motorcycle units, and what does that tell you about access to proper equipment? Is this a proper equipment? Yes, there are some advantages you can gain from attacking in motorcycles. One of the advantages is instead of, like we just seen here, so you may have, so let's imagine, I've seen some APCs packed full of like 20 troops. Imagine you got 20 troops in that. It doesn't matter whether that did happen or not, but imagine you got 20 troops in that APC. It gets utterly blown to pieces. You've lost 20 troops. You now have this situation where you're seeing motorcycle units. So here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe more. I don't know, but you've got a whole a dozen motorcycles attacking in doing a mounted attack, if you like. It's almost like cavalry. It's like the good old days of cavalry, and these units are now spread out. So you got 20 people on 20 motorcycles instead of 20 people in one APC. You blow out the APC, you can kill all 20 people. How do you take out 20 people on motorcycles that are all spread apart? Well, ideally you want to keep them spread apart, but of course the natural inclination for humans is to gather together. You just get to a point, they gather a bit too close. And actually what the Ukrainians have chosen to do here is take them out. Obviously, if you're going to try and take these out with artillery, then you're going to be peppering the whole area, and it might take 30, 40 artillery rounds, maybe even more, to take out these people. I remember showing you, and certainly referencing it, there was some incredible footage of a Russian attack. I forget where it was. It was somewhere up north, and they were mounting this attack, and these were troops out in fields, and there was a Ukrainian bunker that sorry, not bunker, little trench network that had relatively few Ukrainians in, and they called in mortar strikes. I think it was originally, I thought they were artillery strikes, but I think the explosions were too small. But anyway, the point was that they did manage to defend their little bunker system and repel the Russian attack and kill a number of people. But it took dozens and dozens and dozens of strikes of either artillery and or mortars. And so to successfully strike these motorcycles, you may end up having to use maybe 40 artillery shells to do it. And of course they don't have that. So what the Ukrainians use here is a HIMARS round that takes them out. And you can see there, it kind of spreads over that whole unit. And then afterwards you've got burning motorcycles and whatnot. It seems to have done the trick. You're kind of working out, is one HIMARS rocket a cluster rocket, or I don't know if that's a cluster munitions or tungsten. So either way, you know, taking out a dozen motorcycles and motorcyclists, is that a good use of HIMARS? You know, these are the sort of questions that that they must be asking. And of course, well, we've got to take it out somehow, and it's either loads of artillery shells that aren't going to do the kind of damage that these cluster munitions can do. Right, talking about loss of equipment here, we've got a minute's worth of driving down a road, and I think I counted, what was it, 8 or 9 vehicles here. So roads under Russian control have become a cemetery of loafs. Notice how many destroyed vehicles in this 1-minute video sent by a follower. So you've got a road here that just shows just a huge number of burnt out vehicles. So when you go back to here and you see, well, 38 vehicles and fuel tanks, you think, well, 1 minute of footage here is giving us something like 8 or 9 or whatever it was. Yeah, quite incredible. And then we have a bit of footage here. Ukraine attacks Russian positions with aircraft type drones. I've talked about these drones before. You get either the kind of Luti drones that have twin tails at the back, or actual aircraft drones. I think these are smaller than aircraft drones, but they're that kind of style one, these are like small propeller driven aeroplanes, large propeller driven drones. So this is in Kursk. The Moscow boys, so the Russians, are complaining. In the Kursk direction, the Ukrainian armed forces are already attacking the positions of the 810th Brigade with aircraft-type drones, and this is far from the first case. Apparently, they have an abundance of these drones there. Interesting. So I wonder, I don't really have much more to say on this other than I wonder what they use these types of drones for. This is a sort of drone you can imagine slamming into an oil refinery, but using these in a dynamic maneuvers, you know, you're doing combined maneuvers here in this large Kursk area. How would you use drones like this? What munitions do they have on board? Do they drop munitions? Is this one that's been shot out of the sky, or is this a kamikaze drone? You know, I don't know. I don't know. But we haven't seen that kind of a drone being applied to that sort of combat scenario. Right, I reported yesterday there was an explosion, a car bomb in Luhansk. And we are now finding a bit more details out about this. Yesterday, a Russian official, Major Dmitry Pervuka, was reportedly eliminated in the centre of occupied Luhansk, according to the HUR. An explosion occurred in the UAZ Patriot vehicle, where he was located. Pervuka held the position of Chief of Staff of Military Service and Security. He is no more. What is the HUR? That is the intelligence, GUR or HUR, depending on how it's transcribed. Yeah, so Russian occupied Luhansk. That is what's happening. That's what's happened. Sorry. Okay, and a bit of Russia on fire. The reason I'm including this one, fairly large fire of a hangar. This is in Kaliningrad, which is the exclave, sort of sandwiched between the Baltics, Poland sort of area there, where the Russians obviously control that. And now we have a French fries making plant in the city of Kaliningrad, warehouse there, or a hangar that makes French fries, apparently, up in flames. Could just be, obviously, a big health and safety issue, careless smoker. Nothing to do with the war necessarily, but you never know. Okay, it just happens an awful lot, doesn't it? Right, moving on to distance strikes, we have the usual slew of drones being sent over by Russia. 56 drones, again another really significant night of drones. 22 shot down, 27 stopped by EW, so another night where electronic warfare has been more effective than interceptions. It just shows how much better and better the Ukrainians are getting at using electronic warfare to bring down these drones. 2 went for a visit in Belarus. So what do we have? That's 49, 51, 5 hit targets near the front line. Yeah, so 5 of them hit targets. Interesting, near the front line. I wonder if they're using these Shaheds, as they have done occasionally, in frontline areas, rather than sending them into cities deep behind the front line and to hit key infrastructure. We have heard them being used, particularly in the Kherson area, near the front line on occasion. One KH-59 guided bomb, that's a cruise missile, KH-59, also got through Ukrainian defences. So there was a cruise missile that escaped interception as well. Now, I don't know if this footage is coming out subsequent to that. This is in a daytime. A swarm of Russian Shahed 136s or Garan 2s, depending on whether you think they're Iranian or Russian, long-range one-way attack drones were somewhere over Ukraine. So there's a swarm of these, supposedly, quite a few drones, maybe still in the air. So the attack might have continued into today, and there might be more news coming out about that as we go. Right, now, tonight, a small air target flew into Romania. The country decided to raise fighter jets, the Romanian Ministry of Defence reports. So this is one of these Shahed drones, one would think. For tracking, 2 Romanian F-16s and 2 Spanish F-18s were taken into the air. The unidentified target flew deep into Romania for 19 kilometres, and here's the key, and then disappeared from the radar. Now, why this is important is because, and I was going to report this anyway in my geopolitics video or my military aid video, is that yesterday Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, reacted to the flights of Russian drones and missiles in Romania during the shelling of Ukraine, or the attacks on Ukraine, calling for a response to such incidents. So he said yesterday, quote, "And in view of Russia's war against Ukraine, which led to the violation of the airspace of NATO countries, in particular Romania, I want to say the following. NATO shows its solidarity, and we also call on Romanian authorities to respond effectively to this incident. So isn't it coincidental that night a drone gets through into Romanian airspace and then disappears from the radar, and there are 4 NATO planes scrambled? Now, Jürgen Naudit, a German analyst here, I think he might also write articles, etc., etc. He said, NATO wants to shoot down Russian drones. I won't believe that until the first drone is on the ground. Well, actually, that may have happened last night. I don't know. But 2 and 2 could well, in this instance, equal 4. We'll see. Now, Odessa has been attacked, damaged in 3 separate places, but it's not known yet about the victims. 3-story private house was damaged with ammo from a cluster missile found at the site. So a missile, it could have been a KH-59 with a cluster warhead, I don't know, but interesting. So cluster munition being used in residential areas is obviously, if that is intentional, is pretty despicable. Elsewhere, 10 private houses were hit by falling debris, while minor damage at a 3rd site. Now, these could be as a result of air defense working. So these Odessa strikes could be to do with the electronic warfare success or those being shot down, because in both cases those drones still come down and you're still going to get an exploding warhead hitting the ground unless the drone explodes in the air, which can happen. So you can set off the drone by firing it at it in a way that blows up the warhead, but you're still going to have debris coming down, sometimes fiery debris, which can then cause issues. Or you shoot down the drone by taking out its wings or whatever, it then falls down, or electronic warfare makes the engine stop working, loses connection, falls out the sky. That bad boy is going to explode when it hits the ground. And so these incidents of successful Russian, well, not success, of Odessa infrastructure being hit could be in terms of all of those types of scenarios, rather than the Russians aiming for that infrastructure. At night, Russians attacked a critical infrastructure facility in the Chernihiv region. So that's now we're going back to the north. According to the regional military administration, the enemy's army also attacked Sumy region. Energy and infrastructure facilities were damaged. A number of settlements in the Shostka region are also without electricity. That could be a case of those 5 drones getting through in those areas. Right, Russia claims a drone attack themselves on St. Petersburg. So the media reported power outages in part of the city. Footage of explosions in the village in the Leningrad region were also published. So there have been some strikes into Russia, but we don't always hear about the details of these. Who knows? They might have had some success there in terms of taking out Russian targets, but yeah, just don't know. As no report says, last night drones attacked the Kremny EL factory in Bryansk. So this is just across the border from Sumy Oblast. So we're talking about how Sumy and Chernihiv were possibly struck. Actually, the other side of the border into Russia, we have in Bryansk, this site that produces components for air defense systems has been hit. It's one of Russia's largest manufacturers of microelectronics. It was hit late in 2023, so almost a year ago. It was also targeted by the Ukrainians. So that's Kremny EL. And PS01 says that last night explosions were heard over Kopeisk in the Chelyabinsk region. So this is actually a yesterday post going back to 2 nights ago. And did I say that there was possibly some strikes? Anyway, explosions were heard in that region, 1,800 kilometers from Ukraine. Eyewitnesses are sure that air defense was working over the city. The city of Kopeisk is home to the JSC Plastmass plant, which produces a wide range of ammunition for the Russian Ministry of Defense. And that might have been the night I said I'd heard that there were drones taking off from Ukraine. There were reports of drones, and then didn't really hear anything. And this, you don't know how often this happens, particularly with Ukraine firing stuff into Russia. Russia's such a massive country, and if you're going to have a very sensitive, I don't know, it's speculating here, but if you have a sensitive manufacturing facility for the Russian military, it's likely to be quite far away from Europe and in the middle of nowhere. What that means is if the Ukrainians are striking them with drones, you're not always going to have video footage of this taking place. There's no one living nearby that's going to just upload that to the socials. And so you might have a situation whereby the Russians are suffering an awful lot more. The Ukrainians could be striking an awful lot more targets more frequently than we may give them credit for. We just don't know about it. And there's another example, potentially, you know, the city of Kopeisk and maybe the JSC Plastmass plant. And arsenal of missile and artillery weapons was attacked in Serdobsk in Penza region, according to Astra, and this happened on the night of the 16th and 17th. That one... Chelyabinsk, that one last night, Chelyabinsk here, the Chelyabinsk one I was just talking about, might have actually been last night. So that is coming from last night, 10:36 my time, which would have been 12:36 in Ukraine, maybe a little bit further in Chelyabinsk. So that's in the middle of the night, last night. Yeah, so that's not from a couple of nights ago. This is the one that was from a couple of nights ago, sorry. Residents heard explosions on the night of October the 16th and 17th. Several jet drones attacked the arsenal of missile and artillery weapons in Serdobsk, 700 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. Interesting. So jet drones were used by the Ukrainians to attack Russia, and we have heard that these Palantir drone could be that one. We're hearing that France have been sort of playing around with some fairly quick drones, but I don't think they have the range for this kind of activity. But anyway, interesting claim there. But exactly the point I was making earlier, that you don't know what is being done to Russia on a daily basis. We don't hear about all the successes. Right, Ukraine successfully, onto other bits and pieces, successfully negotiated the return of 95 prisoners of war from Russian captivity. It was, I think, at 95 and 95, so one-to-one swap, including 20 people who were facing life sentences. Many Ukrainians have now have serious illnesses, severe injuries, and significant weight loss due to torture and malnutrition in Russian captivity. This marks the 58th such exchange, freeing a total of 3,767 people. Since Russia's full-scale invasion began, the UAE acted as mediator in this prisoner exchange. What was nice about this particular one is you had a mother... You had two brothers who appeared to have been in captivity. I don't know if they were together, but at the same time. And then you have a mother who hasn't seen either brother for 2 years, and obviously getting reunited. And this is endearing. Of course it is.
Я только не скажу. Сказала. Бабуля. Ой, как я в доме соскучился. И вот так все. Привет. Привет. Ты прям с табличкой, братан. Я ж пускай. Відпускай.
Там сока.
Антон, берите, будь ласка, тут всі. Антон, здорово. Краса.
Все добре, Валюш, я з ним. Все добре, не плач, все вже добре.
So I think it's nice to see some of that sometimes, remind ourselves of the human element to this war. I just, at the beginning, I think you had these two brothers. I missed out. No, I missed it. There's one where a woman is just hugging her two sons. Absolutely. Oh, it doesn't have it in that one. It wasn't that video. So there's another one where a woman is just, you know, her two sons were returned at the same time. Absolutely incredible. Right, just to talk about a couple of updates. Like, things are really challenging in the Kursk region for the Ukrainians. Russian forces in Kursk have made significant advances and cut deep into Ukrainian-controlled areas as a result of a rapid push. A large sector of the northwest of the incursion is now contested, and that's broadly, well, Surat maps would say that's under Russian control. Andrew Petra would say it is contested, it's grey zone, and War Mapper would say that it is contested. So there's a lot of pressure for the Russians on this western area. Now, of course, that is for sure what the Russians are going to do. They're going to be pushing right back there. They're also pushing towards the Oskil River, as I told you in my in my mapping update last night. Very close to the river there, which is something of a worry. They've pushed to the north of Nevska, so Nevska, which is this is the Zherebets River as it comes down here. Which is relatively similar kind of area. And in Prokrovsk sector, so this is Seladovi I was talking to you about before, about that unit possibly operating around there with the 2 drone pilots who were sent on meat assaults, and that unit taking a lot of losses. It could be this area of the Prokrovsk salient. Russians attacking in a number of places there. You've got coming a bit further down, so this is Seladovi coming down, then you've got Ukrainsk, and they're trying to also move towards Karakova, just south of there. So the Russians really putting the Ukrainians under an awful lot of pressure pretty much bloody everywhere. This is Chasiv Yar, where they are looking at getting across the canal at the moment, and that is definitely a worry. And in Toretsk, actually, there is something of stability compared to the other places, but here some attacks through New York to the north of New York, which is what Surat maps had there. Not all mappers agree as to how much area the Russians control here. I know that NATO Reports doesn't agree with Surat maps in that particular area. Anyway, just a little bit of a mapping update. I reported yesterday that the Russians are claiming that Ukrainians are claiming that the Russians might be gearing up for a big attack in Zaporizhia. So that's that southern front line. You've got Mariupol here, Berdyansk there, that they are amassing troops there and training them ready for a new phase that could start as early as next week, said the deputy to the mayor of Mariupol. That's Ukrainian side. Now, on the other hand, there's this claim has come out. So the Russians blew up a bridge in Aleski. I almost reported this yesterday. It was over the Konka River, which is one of the kind of, you've got the Dnipro River that comes down past Kherson, but alongside the Dnipro you've got some smaller kind of tributaries. One of them is a Konka River, over which they had to get in order to attack, if you remember, Krinky, and it wasn't just a case of crossing the river and getting your stuff. It was crossing the river and then getting to some land, some kind of marshy islands, and then crossing that, and then crossing the Konka River, and then so on and so forth. So it's quite difficult terrain to negotiate. Well, the Russians have blown up a bridge in Aleski in the Kherson region in anticipation of a Ukrainian offensive, according to Atesh, a partisan group. Quote, it's also reported that all units of the occupiers of up to 15 kilometers deep have been put on full combat alert, say Atesh. However, this is only one of the versions. The occupiers could have destroyed a bridge for another, so far unclear reason. Now, I think that latter point is important to note, because it would blow my mind if the Ukrainians were getting ready to attack across the Dnipro River. It's highly unlikely. But Aleski has been under quite a lot of pressure. It was when Krinky was on the cards, but not so much anymore. So here we've got Kherson, you've got the Antonivsky Bridge here, and Krinky a little bit further up the river there, but Aleski, as you can see, very close to Kherson, quite a major sort of satellite town that would have been in peacetime. It could be that the Ukrainians are getting ready for attack there. I doubt it. Then, of course, the whole North Korean thing that I've talked about a lot yesterday. These troops getting ready in the east of Russia. Some people, I had my live stream last night with Jake Bro, and he kind of played down this idea of like 11,000, 12,000 troops. They won't even last a month. You know, the Ukrainians will eat them up. But I'm not so much in agreement with him now. I pretty much agree with everything he said. I do disagree about the not being too worried about the North Koreans, because any extra troops and any extra equipment brought to bear against the Ukrainians will kill Ukrainians and exhaust their resources. It's just what will happen. So it is going to be an extra large challenge. It's just another challenge on a country whose resources are scarily scarce. And this is my view, what this person says, Jojo here, I don't know who they are, but I do agree with this view. I'm tired of people here downplaying North Korean troops in Ukraine. There's nothing funny about it. I understand that 10,000 troops might not turn the tide and get the Russians in Kyiv in 3 days. It's the reality that Ukraine is now at war with 2 countries, and we have no idea what will be the limit for North Korea in this war. This could well be only the beginning of what number of troops they will decide to send. We are talking about the North Korean troops in Europe. Taking any of this lightly, like our leaders are doing, is deadly to Ukraine. Also, that North Korea has one of the largest armies on earth, 1.4 million from Google, and I'm hearing that they can call up to 7 million men for the army. I will say it now, if this alliance gets success, any success, they will take it as a green light and a way to push into Europe. So I'm in agreement with this. It's like, this is not good. Like, whichever way you look at it, you can try and sell this as not being a major problem, and it may not be, but it is a problem. These troops will cause Ukrainian troops to die who wouldn't have died had these troops not been put into the mix. And it will cause the depletion of vital resources that the Ukrainians barely have. This is not cool. Now, it's interesting. I think the French foreign minister was saying the right sort of things yesterday. I think really seeing this as the serious matter it is. There are some people in Congress in the US saying, why the hell hasn't Joe Biden told us about this? This is freaking serious. So that there are people who are particularly worried about this development. I would be one of them. I just don't think this is good at all. Right, I'm just going to leave you on something which really is for my geopolitics segment or video. But basically Apple, the tech company Apple, has withdrawn certain apps. So the Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, these are like fighting the good fight for the Western narrative. These are pro-Ukraine. These are news agencies funded by the US, actually, that are writing the narrative and actually doing some really good work. And also, in this case, a TV channel, Current Time, which is an opposition TV channel, Russian opposition TV channel, have been removed from the Russian App Store. So the Apple App Store. Russia has asked Apple to get rid of voices that are antithetical to the Russian state voice. And Apple have gone, oh, I guess if we don't, Radio for Europe were absolutely vital for the fall of the Berlin Wall. I mean, that's how important these guys are as an institution. And Apple has gone, well, if we don't do this, then they're going to kick us out of Russia. So obviously money, and they have complied. Apple have complied with the dictatorial requests or orders from the Kremlin and removed, free voices representing democracy and freedom. This is not an easy decision, because if Apple pull out, then obviously they're going to lose money, and then there'll be no free voices through Apple apps. But then I would say, yeah, I would pull out of Russia. I don't know. It would be nice if the US administration went, we think you should pull out. Thank you very much. We're going to put pressure on you to pull out, because actually all you're doing is you are allowing people with Apple phones to be more and more ensconced in the Russian narrative, rather than if you pulled out, it would be a big hit to Russia, to people with all their iPhones and all their Apple computers. And of course, that's the financial hit that Apple would take. But I don't know, this kind of thing really, I would boycott Apple if I used any Apple devices. I don't. But this kind of thing, actually, I've got an iPod that I could dust off, and not dust off. But yeah, it just annoys me. This annoys me. Anyway, that's enough from me. You guys take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.